Welcome to Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. Very recently, Homage, a regional technology-led caregiving and health platform, announced that it has secured a $30 million fundraising round in a Series C. This translates to about over 120 million ringgit by Sheares Healthcare Group, which is a wholly owned healthcare enterprise under Temasek in Singapore. Joining the Sheares Healthcare Group in this Series C fundraising round include DG Daiwa Ventures, Sagana Capital, alongside existing investors such as East Ventures Growth, HealthX Capital, Seed Plus, Tree Hill Capital, and Alternate Ventures. This is going to make it one of the largest fund-raising rounds by an on-demand care platform in this region. And here to unpack this and more is a good friend of ours from Homage, PC. Of course, PC is the head for the Malaysia unit. So there's a lot to talk about, not just about Homage, but the Malaysian unit as well. How are you, PC?
I'm great. Thank you, Ibrahim, for having me here.
Let's talk about what you guys are gonna do with the money. Are you guys gonna start buying, Ferraris and stuff like that, or it's more of the? No, but this is very exciting. I can't wait to, because the last time I spoke to Gillian, it was about trying to expand into the mega cities, at least in Malaysia and some parts of the region. Do you plan to go on this path even more?
So I think the last series was really to also expand into the other regions here in Southeast Asia. So we are now already in Australia, going into the C4, the next country soon. But specifically for Malaysia, yes, that's a lot of money. But I think being in this space also, tech can really bridge a lot of gaps here in Malaysia. But what I see the biggest thing that we need to do right now is, I think the first things first is accessibility. Many times, actually, even right up to today, I still get people asking, so how much is like, do you have a nursing home? So I think to people's mind, they still want to go to a physical home, and the idea is still leaving their home to get treatment. So I think for Malaysia, it's still at the phase of helping Malaysians understand that you can actually get treatment from the comfort of their home. So that's the first part.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the exact topic that we talked about with Gillian, as in the market understanding of what Homage brings about in developed countries. In Singapore, the concept is a little bit more familiar. However, in Malaysia, you're entering a space where I think you are timing yourself for future-proofing it rather than timing yourself for the demands of today, which is fine. But I just want to understand a little bit more about how the reception has been. Is the market receptive, at least in Malaysia?
Yeah. So I think on the urban side of things, we are getting traction, especially during the pandemic, where people are just afraid to leave the homes to get treatment. And I think there are also protocols where hospitals and even clinics, they require you to do a test before you even enter in to get treatment. So I think this pandemic has helped us accelerate the definition of home care. But I think the moment we leave a little bit outside of KL or even Selangor, or even like prime locations like Johor Bahru and also in Penang, people will still want to travel that 2 hours, 3 hours to go to the nearest hospital. So that's the gap that I still see. But the tech part of it that has really accelerated at this point is that I think now, with COVID, instead of going to a drive-through or going to a hospital to get a swab, the other part of our business that has actually taken up is really home swaps, because why risk yourselves to the dangers out there? So what we have been doing is, I think we've been serving close to about 200 plus homes on a monthly basis, just purely on doing home swaps.
Right, because Homage has raised over 45 million US dollars, or 60 million SGD, or roughly about 180 million ringgit. This has put your valuation to at least halfway across of being a unicorn. Do you feel that this is just going to be built on strength upon strength, that much is going to come, at least from the fundraising aspect of things?
Yeah, definitely. So I think generally startups, when we raise funds like this, it's really into three pillars. The first one is really the tech part of it. Next one is on resourcing, especially in our business here. It's a high tech, high touch service. So there's a lot of things we're going to invest on in tech. That's the first one. The next one is really on resourcing. So the resourcing part of things is really how do we elevate quality of care to Malaysians here? Oftentimes, our care pros are being compared to a domestic helper, for example. But a domestic helper may not be able to differentiate if a senior is really getting into a demented mode or having Alzheimer's. So this is where we equip our care professionals with all this knowledge so that they are able to serve these seniors and so that they are able to age with dignity.
Right. You were mentioning just now that the market reception is going to be receiving something that has always been there for developed world. You were also mentioning that in the urban side of things are a little bit more familiar. But as you even leave the periphery aspects of town, things can be back to square one where you have to educate the market. Having said that, with this kind of firepower that you have, the 45 million or at least the 30 million that you have from the Series C, can we expect the business to be exported to mega cities in Southeast Asia, at least in Manila, in Bangkok, in Jakarta? Or do you feel that there's still a lot of growth domestically that needs to be done first to tighten up the markets that you are already operating in? Which kind of strategies will Homage deploy in the weeks and months to come?
I think from a group perspective, Gillian and the board would really want to expand to Southeast Asia and Oceania. But I think for me, I'm really proud that even with all these new VCs coming in, we are very mission driven. So even when being in talks with them, the idea is really to channel the funds of these developed markets, learning from their tech, learning even from whatever subsidy that's happening there. How can we make sure that people in the I wouldn't even call Malaysia a developing market. I think I want to believe that we are way beyond that. But I think really is to learn from that and how do we be the change that we want to see for Malaysia. And then subsequently is really to move on to the next countries, let's say, for example, like Thailand, Indonesia. But I think
Yeah,
what we
the
really want to do is really to make sure that we have got a whole stronghold here in Malaysia.
The last time I had Gillian on the show, we were talking about the dichotomy that you guys have to manage between you guys are a platform provider, there are customers or clients that you have to find and service, which is the main purpose of having this company. But of course, you have the service provider, which is on the other end of the platform. And at that point in time, Gillian was talking about still managing the demand and supply side of things. How has things been since the last time you guys came on? Do you feel that you guys got the supply side tightened up, or there's still room for growth in terms of sourcing for healthcare providers, for nurses, for medical providers and such?
So I think being in the whole gig economy helps people understand better that they can now come onto our platform and apply for jobs. So that's the first thing that we have managed to debunk. And then the second part of it is really with all these care providers, when they come in from all sorts, whether if it's private sectors or public sectors, what we realize is that because this then becomes a platform for them to apply for jobs, this helps accelerate the vaccination program a lot faster. Example here in Kuala Lumpur in itself. So with that, we know that we are the largest care provider right now in Malaysia to be able to help facilitate this kind of governmental programs. So that's on the nurse part of things. Now, the second thing, which is a little bit harder to improve on, is really the quality of caregivers. Now, this part here, just purely based on our demand that's coming in, 80% of our hours that has been serviced is really on the non-medical side of things. So what this means is that really dealing with seniors who have got dementia, Alzheimer's, example. Now, all of this requires EQ. So it's really equipping Malaysians who have this calling, who wants to serve, but equipping them with in a way that they are able to engage with seniors. So I think we are now at the second portion of equipping our care providers with different level of skill sets right now.
So this is extremely interesting. Sorry, we're gonna stick around on this point a little bit more. What kind of skills are you looking for? Is it and how are you going to improve on the quality? What metrics do you look at?
So I think there are two sides of things. One is technical skill sets where it can be administered by nurses, therapists, where all of this is skill set based. Now the other portion is on the I would say is for the non-communicable disease. So a lot of these we need to get expert helps. So say for example, we would want to call up to universities or even associations who have done a lot of researches on this non-communicable disease. And with this, we are able to come up with a scope of or syllabus to equip our caregivers. Now, I don't believe that there is such particular platform in Malaysia that's doing this. So I think from that perspective, I want to be the first mover for Malaysia to equip all of these caregivers, and then we are able to give quality care to Malaysians.
Okay, we'll go for one short break before we continue on our conversation with Homage Malaysia. Thanks for staying on with us. I have with me PC Gan, the boss or the head of the Homage that is in Malaysia right now. PC, let's talk a little bit more about the internal company within Malaysia and how it matches up against the landscape. The care for the geriatric care for Malaysians, at least the awareness is on the rise. The issues relating to geriatric care, such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and prolonged or lifelong issues on comorbidity, things like blood pressure, high blood pressure, heart issues, and the likes, seem to be getting a lot more prominence following the pandemic. Do you feel that things are a little bit better in terms of how we want to take care of our lives and our health leading up to old age? Or do you feel that that kind of awareness is still far off the mark and a lot needs to be done in terms of how we approach geriatric care and how we lead our lives coming up to that point?
I think this pandemic is a little bit hard on some people. I think social isolation is one of them. And with that, the most talk about now is really on mental health. And this is something that we see a lot in terms of not just for senior care. What we are also seeing is that the people who require home care right now is getting younger and younger. What we also notice is that a lot of times people would think that it's okay, I'm working from home, I'm able to care for my loved ones right now. But at the end of the day, there's this thing called the caregiver burnout. And there is also, to a certain extent, that, juggling between work from home and it's still the same four walls and taking care of a loved one, we tend to push onto each other's buttons. So, and I think a lot of times, loved ones or even children like myself, we may not understand what they're going through. So, and sometimes it's a lot easier to get advice from an outsider. So I think how our space has actually changed right now is that we somewhat became a consultant to the loved ones, and even to a point that we become a mediator between the children and also the seniors. But in terms of the medical condition in itself, a lot of times intervention needs to happen with a professional. So say, for example, when we have doctors on board, we now do teleconsultation. So a lot of things, it's really just walking them through. And because now it's all done via teleconsultation, you can spend a lot more time. You get you get a lot more assurance rather than a physical face-to-face kind of thing. And I suppose
Yeah.
there's a lot of information available now on our internet. So this is something that we are also pushing out on, which is content, and to just give a lot more awareness on certain non-communicable disease.
Now, let's talk a little bit more about caregiver burnout, because we think that we can soldier on. The thinking is, sorry, I'm speaking out of my own personal experience, right? We take care of our kids, and our parents have taken care of us, and it's a lifelong effect, and therefore we assume that we can take care of our elders, and one doesn't realize that the requirements of having a productive life, managing your children, and managing your peers, having a good social life, while at the same time managing your elders, suddenly becomes a burden where we as Asians might feel apprehensive to talk about it. We might feel guilty talking about it, because if they could do it, why can't us? That whole social aspect kicks in. So it's a little bit different from a Western kind of civilization where everything is at arm's length, even if it's a social member. Of course, I'm using broad strokes here, and I'm generalizing way too much, right? But I'm sure that kind of Asian sentiment feeling towards how we care for the elders kind of suppresses us to talk a little bit more about a caregiver burnout. Is there some truth into my alignment here, or do you feel that my perception has to be I guess misaligned a little bit?
So absolutely on point, Ibrahim. I think initially when we first started this business, there's a lot more messaging, public service awareness, if you may put it, is to assure that children that outsourcing help does not mean that you're not feeling, it does not mean that you're not taking care of your parents. So say, for example, and so I'll just give you another example, is that they say, right, as they get older, they tend to become more childlike. And us
Yeah.
being stuck in a sandwich generation, we've got our own children to take care of, and then here we are, we have our parents.
Club sandwich, PC. Club sandwich. That's the conversation right now. We're taking care of either 2 generations down or 2 generations up. But yes, sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of times we are caught between these two, but it's fine. So I think we were at a phase at one point of time. I'm trying to tell Malaysians that it's okay. It's okay to just outsource that 2 hours or that 3 hours to just get help that you cannot cope. And at the end of the day, when we used to travel, during turbulent times, the announcement is always take care of yourself first before you take care of the person right next to you. And it's the same concept. If you are not filled, if you're not healthy, mentally you're not stable, how are you then able to provide or even care for the person right next to you? I think it's the same sentiment. Oftentimes we will juggle and we will still come back to that I think social criticism in that sense, because there will always be the auntie and uncles like, "Ayo, why you did that? Why did you get help?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's that too.
Okay, one more short break before we continue our conversation with PC Gan of Homage Malaysia. Thanks for staying on with us. PC, let's talk a little bit more about tech and the pandemic. You're one of those companies that fundraise during a pandemic, but at the same time, you are one of those companies that are kind of benefiting from the pandemic because of the intersection that you guys are in technology as well as in healthcare. the disruption that is going to happen in the healthcare industry is just going to be enormous. We've seen some companies just do well, extremely well, following the pandemic. And it's not that you are preying on the ill, but you are, of course, bringing essential services to a world that is rapidly changing. Do you feel that there's going to be a lot more disruption in this space, particularly in healthcare, in care for the elderly, in care for those that require 100% supervision? And how does tech leverage the growth of a company like yours?
Ibrahim, that is such a good question. So the reason why I say that is I look at myself, and if I'm going to fast forward it to 40, 50 years from now, what would the landscape be like in Malaysia? At the end of the day, do I want robots to be taking care of me? Do I want to have an interaction through a video with a doctor, example? I'm not sure. But then again, I'm in a metropolitan, I'm in a city. What else is there for people who are just slightly at the outskirts of this urban area, right? So, and then we look further out into maybe other districts, let's say, for example, like Muar or Klang, for example. These people are still, they may not have amenities nearby to them. I don't think that will also change. So that's where tech bridge, closes that gap. And then I also look at what are the other options that are available for Malaysians as we get older. Will we still be looking at retirement homes? Are we looking at nursing homes? But I think even if I fast forward it 50 years down the road, I still want to be at the comfort of my own home. And even with that, will I be able to do that? Example, if I don't have children now, will I be able to, will technology be sufficient for me to get help? Example, if something were to happen to me 50 years down the road. So I think from the tech perspective of things, it's really one, creating options for Malaysians. And the second thing is to make sure that we're able to get help instantly without having to travel 3 hours, 4 hours just to get help. And then I think the last piece is really prevention. I think earlier on when you talked about, are we now better equipped, with all these viruses that has been out there? Well, I think as more tech that we get, there will be a lot of other urban diseases, unfortunately. But that's where the prevention of health comes in, right? Will we be able to detect a lot earlier? And all of this, that's where tech comes into place.
My final question to you is this. It seems like the advantage of technology and with services or service care providers like yourself, it's still very much an urban play. When I am old, when I am 90 years old or 100 years old, I don't know whether I want to stick around in towns. I've been growing up in towns since ever. But moving away from towns means moving away from resources, from healthcare providers, from hospitals. What is the, I guess, what is the plan? What is the future like for rural living, for elderly, in a situation where they can enjoy the slow life, but still be in touch or be near healthcare providers and medical services? Is it a big, how should I say this, trade-off? Yeah, that's the word. How, do you think that it's a trade-off to go for the slow life but move away from hospitals and healthcare providers?
That's exactly how I see my retirement to be as well, to be outside of the city, right?
Run away, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does this mean? Does this mean that Homage is going to raise the Series Series B, and then make sure that you guys are in rural areas as well?
Definitely that I think we don't need to wait 40, 50 years down the road. In fact, that is the one thing that I want to do right now, to make it accessible to all seniors, actually anybody, all Malaysians, whether you are right smack in the middle of the city, or even it's you tengah waterfall or something. Yeah, to that point, right? And what the next thing I want to do is to make sure that it's within a certain time. Let's say, for example, if you call for help now, I really want to be like any e-hailing app lah. You want a service now, within 5 minutes there'll be someone right at your doorstep. That's that's what I aim for.
Because my mom, she's like me. She's like born and bred in towns. My grandfather worked in ports. She was literally born in Port Swettenham. Later on, she worked in Port Pasir Gudang, and then now in her old age, she ran away. She ran away to Arau, Perlis, and I check on her every so often. But I'm kind of worried for her. You know what I mean? But it seems like this is a life that is she's comfortable with it, and to be honest, I too want a life like that, right? Just go away to a peripheral area. But that access to healthcare, it's just a bit difficult. Plus, with the pandemic and all that, so she relies on her community in Perlis, which is a very Asian thing if you ask me. But essentially, you still want to be independent. However Asian we are, we still want to have the ability to call for an e-hailing service or for Foodpanda to arrive at our doorstep, that kind of thing. But we look, and I think that trend, that mega trend, is approaching that. I really am very excited with what you guys are doing. But for now, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us, PC.
It's so nice to have you here, or have me here. Sorry, I'm so sorry. But thank you so much for having us again. And I really want to look forward to serving Malaysians better, especially during this time.
Thank you very much. So of you are going to buy the Ferrari, right, from the series?
You'll hear the sound first, then yes, that's me coming.
That was PC Gan, the country manager of Homage Malaysia. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to astroawani.com, look for Notepad over there. You can also look for Homage, HOMAGE, on our website. Until then, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.